So a skill set, let's use execution. Administratively, you got really good grades, right?
Hmm.
You know how to do your homework. To write things out, you're probably not bad at writing. I know you say I'm not a good writer, but you can write, can't you?
Yeah.
And you can get an A on that paper. So that's a skill set. You actually have the skill set of writing. It's not your talent though. You hate doing it. Would that be fair?
Correct.
You
Correct.
know? So the difference is just because I can do something doesn't mean that's a talent. It just means that's something I can do versus something that is my natural disposition. You probably have to try harder as well, right, to develop
Would
the
you say
skill.
like would you say it's like an energy thing? Like if it's with you can develop a skill. However, if it's also your talent, it requires less energy to do that
Yes.
thing.
Yes, I would definitely say so. Oftentimes, your talents and your skills are going to align, so you won't have a lot of skills that aren't in alignment with your talent. It does happen on occasion, but yeah, I would agree with you. It's something that brings you joy. The other thing too, like, is interesting. When you're talented at something and you feel like you're good at it, you're going to naturally enjoy doing it more than if you suck at it.
So that was going to be my next thing, which is why where do you think it comes from when people have a talent they don't like? So for example, like I am talented at sales, but I actually don't love sales.
That's also a great. I think that's a great question. Also, like, so part of it is going to be different facets, and we'd have to dissect a lot of it to figure out what it is you don't like about sales, right? Sometimes it's just we're being lazy. No,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying you are, but sometimes it
Yeah.
just is. I don't like doing that much work. I'd rather, just talk. But there
I
are
think it's
definitely.
for me I think it's I don't like, which is probably for most people as well. I don't like the association. Like I don't like the
Sure.
idea that people think that I'm trying to manipulate them.
Mm,
Like I'd rather them believe what I feel like is true, which is I'm trying to point you in the right direction. Like I'm trying to coach you. So like my
yeah.
entire career in sales, even today, as I've changed, the example I gave earlier, I changed the way that I see sales so I can continue to do it. Because
Right.
there was a point where like I was the number in my old company, I was like the number one sales rep, but I fucking hated sales. Like, I just
Yeah.
didn't like the way it made me feel. So I changed. I figured out another way of doing it. So I used to say like, well, I don't sell. I coach people to their destination.
Right.
So but I'm doing the same thing,
Yeah.
right? But I had to change it in my mind so that way I could feel better about it. But also like, there's people that I know that are like, for example, that like are really really good, at like writing, let's say, but like they hate their own writing, like that kind
Yeah.
of thing too.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a ton that goes into it, but I love kind of what you're saying there because I think it hits on this idea that culturally there are certain talents that, and we talked about it this weekend, but I think it bears to talk about it again. There are some talents that we will actually devalue. So this is a crazy thing, Raylen. I wrote this out once that your talent actually drives your value and vice versa. When you don't honor somebody's talent, you actually devalue who they are as a person, right? And I do believe that. So let's say for men, right? If we are, and I use this example, but I'll use it again. If you are highly empathetic, right? So you have deep empathy and you show up in a way that has this kind of, touchy feely, not touchy, but very feely kind of feeling about it. What is that guy labeled as?
Soft. Yeah.
Yeah, soft. So then what we do in our culture is we teach people, well, and we assign, like, this is where it gets a little bit goofy. You have to be careful about assigning gender to value as well, right? So, well, that's not as masculine, so he can't be empathetic. Or I use the example all the time, a woman who shows up, there's this talent called command, which is presence, right? And you kind of like to be in charge. When a woman shows up that way, culturally, at least in our culture, she's labeled as, just very not desirable. She's labeled as a bitch, she's labeled as this and that, and she learns at a young age that talent isn't, that makes you less desirable as a person, right? That makes
Hmm.
you unacceptable. So then we stop showing up in the most natural state of being, we devalue our talent. And then
And
we
that's where
try
you
to,
can have an imbalance in that skill. Now it's no longer a skill. It's still a talent, but it's no longer a skill anymore because you didn't value it anymore.
right, and you're avoiding it. And so then we wake up and we're like, man, why am I so unhappy all the time? Right? Why do I not feel fulfilled? Well, you've been taking your talent and kind of shoving it away. And so this is the other thing too, like this is the reason I like doing in when we talk about Gallup, there's actually 34 talent themes that are there. There's no way to come up with every single talent. Do you know how much talent there is in the world, Raylan? We'd be hours, days, and months just trying to label them. So they put them in themes and they put these themes in domains. I don't even like to do the theme, like looking at one theme, because it's too, I don't think it doesn't do you justice all the time. It's just very difficult to get down and narrow it into. But so that's the reason I like using the domains, because it helps us to have a better picture, a bigger picture.
What's the difference between a domain? So the domain was like strategic thinking, right? So then what's
Yes,
a theme?
a theme is going to be, so a domain, like I said, we're the four. A theme is going to be a little bit more specific. So let's take, I like influence because that's kind of where I exist, but we'll use command. I think you and I both had command very, very, in fact, I think we both had it at number one, right?
Yeah.
And so the way when we show up with presence. Oftentimes people are going to ask us in charge when we're not in charge, just because we have this air of confidence and, again, being in charge. And that's going to be a theme. Whereas the domain is going to be much broader than that, where they take kind of all of the results and they take your most dominant theme out of it. So again, we'll go to influence. Influence was more than command. I think we both had communication. We both had woo, which is winning others over. It's just the bigger assimilation of those themes, and they put it into domain. It's easier to communicate, and it takes less time, really, for me. But I will use another one, for example, which is, again, relator. People who are deeply relator with the relator theme. And again, this is Anthony. I think it was number one or really close to. He deeply desires and values relationship, pretty much above everything else. So one of the things for him, and actually, I don't remember if you had relator in your top one, Raylan, at all. I don't
I
remember.
can't remember.
But for him, he like abhors doing sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he wants you to come to your own conclusions. He doesn't want to influence you into it, right?
That makes sense.
And for him, that was theme based. Whereas again, for when you and I talk, and probably some things that have been stated, it becomes in the back of our brain, right, subconsciously. How many times you've been told salespeople are terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, gosh, it's terrible. I hate it when people do this and that. And because you're so strong on influence, you naturally sell people all the time. That's your natural state of being. It's not sales, it's influence. It just happens to be that sales are typically high influential people. And then the other side of it is influential people can come across very insincere and very used car salesman, right?
Yeah.
And see, there's the dark side of that talent, and that's where this comes. I naturally lean into influence. I value relationship, and because I value relationship so strongly, I actually don't like the way I show up in people's lives, because I'm always trying to influence you, and it's counterproductive. I don't like my talent anymore because it feels less sincere. But the truth is, when you show up and when I show up, even in our influence, we are sincere. This is who we are and how we were designed. It's just that we learned somewhere in the process culturally, we learned that people who are influencing us are trying to manipulate us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you shift it a little bit though and go, hold on, I'm not trying to manipulate you. I really believe that this strategy is going to help you make a difference in your life. We care deeply. Where we get in trouble as influencers is when we believe we have the right answer for somebody and we
Yeah.
don't listen to what they have to say.